Hello everyone. On my last tier list video, some of you might have been surprised to see a certain style be on the lowest tier. The wolf style. This video will be kind of similar to the video I did on Hawk not too long ago, so it will be pretty straightforward. Before I explain why this style is bad and is in need of a buff, let's talk about its good points first. This style is a pretty strong and experienced player killer, because if you do not know how to deal with wolf is a pretty annoying enemy to fight against. And wolf has one of the most unique gimmicks in the game, a follow-up M2. This gimmick is not actually that good, but I will tell you what makes his follow-up M2, the White Fang, good for certain situations. A funny thing about Wolf's M2 is that it's the fastest M2 in the game. So sometimes you can even outspeed M1s if you time the M2 right. And the follow-up M2 after that, the White Fang, comes out almost instantly. It's so fast that it can even rival the Ghost Jab in terms of speed. The White Fang, his follow-up M2 has a lot of options, so I'm gonna be showing you guys everything you can do with it. First off, the most common option you can use this follow-up M2 on is to deal damage after landing an M2, making you deal damage similar to a smash M2. But that's only if you land both M2s. This option is not safe because they can in fact dodge after your first M2 and perfect dodge, or just normally dodge your follow-up M2. And after the wolf nerf, if you miss the follow-up M2, it will leave you vulnerable. So you will get punished for it a lot of times. Next thing you can use your follow-up M2 on is kind of like a poking tool. You can throw your M2 out of nowhere, and it will catch people who will not suspect it, because you cannot block this on reaction. And you can also throw your M2 out of nowhere and instantly dash towards your opponent, and then throw your White Fang. This is an almost instant attack that is not safe to throw because they can just dodge it, but is a pretty strong poking tool because if the opponent does decide to try and counter it, they will be hit by a near instant White Fang. And this poke option has a lot of mix-ups too, so instead of throwing out the follow-up instant M2, you can wait for a split second and throw the normal M2 instead after dashing, so you can catch people who try to dodge the instant version of the M2. This, however, loses to people who dash twice. Next up, and by far the option a lot of people should be using the White Fang for, is for block breaks. Since the White Fang is almost instant, you can in fact block break people who tend to block too much. The White Fang itself does not actually deal that much block damage, but if you time it right, and only use it when you know it will block break, and unexpectedly, you will block break people, which will make them have to take another M2 or even worse, an ultimate. This option does lose to people who spam dashes while they are blocking, so do keep that in mind. As you may already notice from the options I have mentioned, his greatest weapon, his follow-up M2 the White Fang, is also his greatest weakness. And on top of that, Wolf's damage is pretty lackluster as well. His M1 damage deal alright damage, but for his M2s, you need to land 20 plus M2s to kill your opponent, and that's only for his first M2. His follow-up M2 does even less damage than his normal M2. Which kind of sucks, especially when you take into account doing anything with his follow-up M2 will make you lose your turn, and will force you and your opponent to be back on neutral. Like, if they block your White Fang, your turn is over. If you land your White Fang, your turn is over. If you miss your White Fang, it's your opponent's turn. No option using his follow-up M2 leads to you dealing more damage. Which is pretty bad thing, especially when you take into account that the White Fang is what makes Wolf, unique. And you are supposed to be using the White Fang always, but because of how bad the White Fang is, and how it deals no damage on both your opponent's health and guard, and how it also leaves you vulnerable in some cases, most of the time, with Wolf, you are better off just relying on your first M2 instead and not your follow-up M2 the White Fang. I honestly think this style should get a buff of some kind, just because of his damage being lackluster, and his follow-up M2 being straight up garbage. You can literally just tank the White Fang because of how bad its damage is, and punish the Wolf for landing it. And most if not all of the other styles can easily outdamage Wolf in most cases. And yeah, that's about it. I will be showing you guys how I use Wolf. And honestly, it's a pretty fun style to use if you use it right. On second thought, I think C tier is too low for him. I will move him up to B tier. Anyways, that's about it for the wolf style. Do you think this style needs a buff? What are your opinions about it? Feel free to leave your thoughts on the comment section below. As always, if you enjoy daily Untitled Boxing Game content, feel free to subscribe. I upload once of these videos every day and you subscribing makes me closer to the 100,000 subscriber milestone. Anyways, that's all for me. See you guys on the next one. Peace.